ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Stay at Home Show. This is segment 3 of the Stay at Home Show. Thank you for joining me. And in this one, we're going to take it really light. I'm going to talk just a very little bit about Ted Chiang and his book Exhalation, and we're going to try to find a story in here that we could read. Ted Chiang is a science fiction writer. He has written, he wrote a story called Stories of Your Life, upon which the movie The Arrival was based, or Arrival. I should know if it's got "the" in there or not, but this was a really good movie that was about aliens contacting humans, but it also had a lot of complicated ideas like time travel, the idea of existing outside of time. It was very much about language and about the different forms that language can take, and it was also about the problem of suffering, and if it is valuable to choose happiness, if it must come with suffering, or if it must be finite. Really, really good story. But this is Exhalation. And since I don't want to just hold the page up here and talk about it, we are going to take a look at the Wikipedia page for Ted Chiang's collection. That would be here. And we have Exhalation Stories, a collection of stories by American writer Ted Chiang, initially released in, hold on, don't give me a pop-up, initially released in May 2019. Contents, this is what I would like to talk about. I will want to talk a little bit about, let's make this small again so I can talk directly to you. This makes it, here we go. So these stories were pretty good. Well, let's just make this whole screen because I'm not sure if you folks can read that or not. Maybe I ought to make this a little bit bigger. Anyway, just because I don't know how well it's coming out. So, we have a story called The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate. Hold on. Here we go. We have a story called The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate. This was a really cool story. They were all really cool stories. I should try not to say that. If I say that, I will end up saying that for nearly every story that I mention. But a merchant is anybody selling things, somebody whose career is selling things, and an alchemist is kind of the word for chemistry when chemistry was still a magical business. People were trying to do things like find a potion that will let them live forever, or find a potion that will cure every sickness, or turn some kind of simple metal like iron into a really expensive metal like gold. Chemistry ideas, but without yet knowing what chemistry was. But in stories, alchemists are pretty cool because in stories their magic works. So The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate. Let's see if I can get the book in the picture so that we can still see. Well, there we go. Now my book is in the direction of you folks, except I buggered my camera, and also now I can't use my mouse. One step at a time. I am making this into, little by little, a better, higher quality, more professional kind of affair. The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate is about time travel. I promise these are not all about time travel. The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate is about time travel, and it's really cool because it is set, if I remember correctly, in around the year 1200. And so what it's about is a man who discovers somebody who has time travel available in the form of a gate or a doorway that lets you move 20 years in the future or in the past. Depending on whether you enter from one side, you go 20 years in the past, and if you enter from the other side, you go 20 years in the future. So we hear a story about a man who goes, I think, 20 years in the future and meets his super successful self and asks him, how did you become super successful? So then when he goes back to his regular time, he knows what to do. But then another person goes through the gate and tries to do the same thing. But then when he comes back to when he sees his future self, his self is not successful, and so now he's all in despair about what to do. It's complicated, but the nature of the story, the basics of the story is people trying to change their future or their past, and thereby causing that future or past to happen. It's pretty interesting. Exhalation is the second story, and Exhalation is, of course, the story that Exhalation is, of course, the story that the whole book is named for. And Exhalation was a very good story. I liked it a lot. Exhalation is 21 pages long, and that puts it on the short list for pages that are for a story that I will read here. I'll have to read one of the shortest stories, because as it is, it will probably already be we may have to read it in 2 parts. I don't know. But that one is 21 pages long. The short story Exhalation is about robots trying to discover what they are made out of. But they live forever, so they don't die except by tragic accidents, and so they don't ever get to study what their insides are made out of. They don't ever get to see how their insides work, because it takes an accident bad enough to destroy the entire robot in order to be able to kill it. Might be a bit of a dark story to read, so maybe I'll put that one on hold. The next story, What's Expected of Us. This was pretty cool. How long is the story? The story is only 4 pages. Maybe I won't even talk about what is in the story, what is expected of us, because maybe I will read it instead. It's kind of an amusing story. The next story, The Life Cycle of Software Objects. This was a really good story. This one was very good. And this one I would recommend for anybody. Reading this story alone might be worth picking up the book. The Life Cycle of Software Objects is about AI and about one of the possible outcomes of what is called strong AI or general AI, which means AI that can actually think, AI that is actually a conscious being, or arguably a conscious being. So what happens in this story? A woman who is, by her training and her career, an animal trainer, she's hired to use a virtual reality headset to interact with AI creatures, to try to train them and educate them so that they understand how to behave and how to interact with people. Now, this is related to a thing called machine learning, which is becoming more important with computers these days, where there are ways that we can teach a computer how to do things that are much better than writing out the code for how the computer does this. One example that is quite powerful is called adversarial learning, where one computer tries to do something, say, for example, tries to make a voice that sounds like a human, and another computer is constantly working against it to find ways that it's doing it incorrectly and doesn't sound like a human. And so this back and forth becomes a race of improvement, find more mistakes, improvement, find more mistakes. And this race can go very quickly when it's done in computers. So the idea here with the story, The Life Cycle of Software Objects, is that AI learns best when it's given a very human kind of condition, where it interacts with other creatures and interacts with a kind of parent or maybe a teacher kind of figure. So this woman is hired to raise these creatures, and then once they are taught how to behave properly, they are then copied and sold into the market as digital pets. So one AI that this woman has raised, anybody and everybody around the planet could have their own AI version of this that they could visit in a virtual world to be their pet. But AI doesn't age, so she ends up training these creatures for several years. Also, technology companies, especially new ones, they famously can rise and fall really quickly. A lot of companies start with good ideas and then crash after a few years. So after several years of raising these AI, the woman's company crashes. The woman's company goes away from under her. And so she has to find, because the company has crashed, these AI live on computers in a computer-made space, in a software space. And so somebody needs to own the physical computers that are running the software that keeps a world in existence for these AI. And so this woman takes several months before she can finally get a new server, a new computer running to host this world. And in the process, or during that time lapse, I'm having difficulty remembering this. It has been some months now since I have read these stories. But the point is, she goes through a very human kind of struggle of trying to not only raise these AI in a false computer world where a programmer can decide all of the contents of their world, she also ultimately raises these AI to be able to defend their existence as real beings against people who believe them to be only something like a computer game or a toy. It's a really interesting, and even though it's about AI, it's a very human kind of, emotional kind of story. Dacey's, let's get our big screen back up here. Dacey's Automatic Patent Nanny. I don't remember what that was about, so I'll have to skip talking about that one. And The Truth of Fact and The Truth of Feeling, I also don't remember. The Great Silence, I also don't remember, but I will say this. How long is The Great Silence? That is 6 pages long. I don't think I'll be reading that, though, because I think it might be too heavy. The idea of The Great Silence is our sun is a pretty common star. It's a pretty normal star. And given all the stars out there, there's so much opportunity for other life to have arrived. There's 2 things that I could interpret The Great Silence as. And because there's so many opportunities, when we listen to radio signals and look for light signals in space, we should hear something. It should be easy to find a sign of life somewhere out there. But it is not. We haven't found anything, and there's a lot to look at, but we are looking pretty hard. The other thing The Great Silence could refer to is nope, that is what is it about. Very good. So that problem, in addition to being referred to as The Great Silence, the idea of where is everybody is also called the Fermi paradox. There should be, because of what we think we understand about how nature works, it's easy to assume that there should be creatures everywhere across the galaxy. And we don't see anything that says that there is. And that is the Fermi paradox. Next story is Omphalos, and Anxiety is the Dizziness of Freedom. I am skipping over talking about those because we are going to jump straight to the story, What's Expected of Us. What is expected of us? Now, let's get back to here. Let's get some birds up on the screen so that we have something else to observe beyond simply me reading here. So it is now 6. Our video is running for 25 minutes, 20-ish minutes. Oh my. Am I going to start reading? You know what? I'm going to read an introduction. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read an introduction to the story, What's Expected of Us. I'm just going to read the first few paragraphs, and then I'm going to talk about the kind of the meaning of those paragraphs. And then in tomorrow's stay-at-home show, I will not be talking about Ted Chiang and all of the stories and why I think he's a really cool author. I will just be talking this story, and I will read it again from the start in tomorrow's show. So, what's expected of us? I might end up reading this whole thing today. We'll see. We'll see how we feel after a couple paragraphs. This is a warning. Please read carefully. By now, you've probably seen a predictor. Predictor is something that tells the future. A predictor. Millions of them have been sold by the time you are reading this. For those who haven't seen one, it's a small device like a remote for opening your car door. Its only features are a button and a big green LED. Let's get a prop in here. Here we go. A button. This has more buttons than one, but let's pretend there's one button. Let's get another thing that's not going to make me turn my television on by mistake. There we go. This is my predictor. Its only features are a button and a big green LED, a big green battery light. The light flashes boop, if you press the button. Specifically, the light flashes 1 second before you press the button. Boop. Ooh. Most people say that when they first try it, it feels like they're playing a strange game. One where the goal is to press the button after seeing the flash. And it's easy to play, but when you try to break the rules, you find that you can't. If you try to press the button without having seen a flash, boop, the flash immediately appears. And no matter how fast you move, you never push the button until a second has elapsed. 1/1000. Boop. If you try to press the button, oh, we already got that. Sorry. If you wait for the flash, intending to keep from pressing the button afterward, the flash never appears. No matter what you do, the light always precedes the button press. There is no way to fool a predictor. The heart of each predictor is a circuit with a negative time delay. It sends a signal back in time. The full implications of the technology will become apparent later when negative delays of greater than a second are achieved. But that's not what this warning is about. The immediate problem is that the predictors demonstrate that there's no such thing as free will. There have always been arguments showing that free will is an illusion. Some based on hard physics, others based on pure logic. Most people agree that these arguments are irrefutable. One cannot argue against them. But no one ever really accepts the conclusion. The experience of having free will is too powerful for an argument to overrule. What it takes is a demonstration, and that's what a predictor provides. So I want to take a sec. There have always been arguments showing that free will is an illusion, and some based on hard physics and also on biology, especially neurology or brain biology. There are people who argue with very strong arguments that what we think of as our thinking, our choices, and our free will is a result of something and not the cause of something. So these people argue that when I say I am, it's in response to something biological and not just because I made a choice to say that. It kind of means that all of your choices are already made before you make them, or before you even know that you are making a choice. So that is what the problem with believing that we don't have any free will and we do not choose our actions. The problems with believing these things are what this story is going to dig into. Let's keep going. We'll keep going anyway. We're already a little bit far along, but we're also halfway through the story. Are we halfway through? Yep. Typically, a person plays with a predictor compulsively for several days, showing it to friends, trying various schemes to outwit the device. The person may appear to lose interest in it, but no one can forget what it means. Over the following weeks, The implications of an immutable future, an unchangeable future, sink in. Some people, realizing that their choices don't matter, they refuse to make any choice at all. Like a legion of Bartleby the Scriveners. I don't know that reference. They no longer engage in spontaneous action. Eventually, a third of those who play with a predictor must be hospitalized because they won't feed themselves. The end state is akinetic mutism. So I've never heard this term before, but I can understand it. Mute means no sound, so mutism is no sound. They're not speaking. And akinetic, kinetic is about physical movement, either body movement or object movement is kinetic. So akinetic means no movement. So if we continue, he says, a kind of waking coma, when somebody is not, they're out. They'll track motion with their eyes and change position occasionally, but nothing more. The ability to move remains, but the motivation is gone. Before people started playing with predictors, akinetic mutism was very rare, a result of damage to the anterior cingulate region of the brain. I don't know what area that is. Anterior means back or top. I think it would mean back, because I think in terms of people, this way is anterior, not this way. But I don't know biology, so I'm not one to say about that. Now it spreads like a cognitive plague. It spreads like a disease of thought. People used to speculate about a thought that destroys the thinker, some unspeakable Lovecraftian horror, or a Godel sentence that crashes the human logical system. It turns out that the disabling thought is one that we've all encountered, the idea that free will doesn't exist. It just wasn't harmful until you believed it. Doctors try arguing with the patients while they still respond to conversation. We had all been living happy, active lives before, they reason, and we hadn't free will then either. Why should anything change? No action you took last month was any more freely chosen than one you take today, a doctor might say. You can still behave that way now. The patients invariably respond, but now I know. And some of them never say anything again. Some will argue that the fact the predictor causes this change in behavior means that we do have free will. An automaton, something that is operating without any freedom and is just robot-like, an automaton can't become discouraged. Only a free-thinking entity, a being with free will, can. The fact that some individuals descend into akinetic mutism while others don't just highlights the importance of making a choice. Unfortunately, such reasoning is faulty. Every form of behavior is compatible with determinism. Determinism, the idea that everything we do and all of our actions are already written and chosen for us. Not chosen, but just already, everything is already going to happen the way it is going to happen. Every form of behavior is compatible or matches with determinism. One dynamic system may fall into a basin of attraction and wind up at a fixed point, while another exhibits chaotic behavior indefinitely. But both are completely deterministic. So he's saying one system may, let's just say physical things, one system may be a rock that falls to the bottom of a hill and then it stays there for all of time, and another may be rocks in space going around each other that never repeat the same pattern in the way they move, but nonetheless their movement is always determined by things outside of choice. I'm transmitting this warning to you from just over a year in your future. It's the first lengthy message received when circuits with negative delays in the megasecond range, or thousands or millions of seconds, are used. That's a lot of seconds. Maybe it just means bigger than seconds. In the megasecond range are used to build communication devices. Other messages will follow, addressing other issues. My message to you is this: pretend that you have free will. It's essential that you behave as if your decisions matter, even though you know they don't. The reality isn't important. What's important is your belief, and believing the lie is the only way to avoid a waking coma. Civilization now depends on self-deception. Perhaps it always has. And yet I know that because free will is an illusion, it's all predetermined who will descend into akinetic mutism and who won't. There's nothing anyone can do about it. You can't choose the effect the predictor has on you. Some of you will succumb, and some of you won't. And my sending this warning won't alter those proportions. So why did I do it? Because I had no choice. And that is the end of Ted Chiang's story, Exhalation. His end line, I had to do it because I had no choice. This is similar to a joke by a famous public speaker named Christopher Hitchens, who, when asked if he believes in free will, he says, "Of course I do. I have no choice." So in Hitchens' case, he was sort of making a joke as a contradiction. Here, he is saying that he did not ultimately choose to send this warning. So that's a very interesting story. And as I said before, there are scientists who have made very strong arguments, and philosophers, I think, who have made very strong arguments to say that we don't actually have free will, and that what we experience as free will is something being played to us after the decisions, after the feelings have already processed. And whether that's true or not, this story is about what happens if everybody believes that it is true. If everybody operates as though none of my decisions ultimately matter. And it's a pretty cool warning. If we had more time, we way don't have more time, but if we had more time, maybe I would talk a little bit about what I think about free will and whether or not we have free will and whether or not it matters if we have free will. But I'm not going to right now. This is the end of this segment. Please let me know in the video comments after this is posted, or through regular channels that you know, with regular ways that you know how to contact me. Let me know what kinds of things that you would like to see me talking about. If you would like me to talk about grammar and English, let me know what kinds of grammar and English things would be useful and helpful for you. If you would like to see me talking about news, let me know about that. If you would like to see me talking about anything, maybe more of our birds. Let's take the birds off the screen now here. The single bird, Mama. Of course, once the eggs hatch, I'll talk about the birds again, the eagles again. But let me know if through any channel, through any way, and through the comments down below, anything that you would like to see me cover. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Stay at Home Show, episode 3. This is the end of segment 3, and that's it. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. I expect to begin uploading episode 3. I don't know what is going to be on episode 3 yet, but perhaps we'll know by 5 o'clock. Same bat time, same bat channel. See you